Last month on eBay, a 1972 Julius Erving in a PSA 9 sold for $14,000, and that doesn't even make the top three for this vintage basketball card list. Today, we're taking a look at the top 25 vintage basketball card sales on eBay. We're going to go over each card, talk about the pops, past prices, and much more. So let's take a look at this list as well as honorable mentions. Let's jump into a few sales. Up first, what I define vintage basketball 81 or earlier, no duplicate cards are allowed, but if there's an auto or a variant, that's fine. Graded and raw cards are okay. So let's jump into a Magic Johnson autograph from 1981 Topps. This is an extremely popular card that I've seen in these videos, but I haven't really seen many of these autographed, and I guess this comp explains it. 1702 for a PSA 9 with an autograph of a 10. Now, if it had a dual 10, obviously it would be in here because this in a PSA 10 sells quite high. But yeah, this is a pop 224 and with an autograph out there, sold 1702. Up next, we have a Phil Chenier. I think that's how you pronounce it. Apologize if I did mispronounce it wrong. This sold slightly more at 1732. It's a PSA 10 with there's only 7 10s out there, so someone in a set builder definitely needed this one. PSA 9 has sold for $11. 1975 Topps Leonard Gray PSA 10. This sold for $1,818. A PSA 9 is a bit more expensive at $50, and it is a pop 1 in a PSA 10. 1961 Fleer Jerry West in a PSA 6. This sold for $2,000. If you did want to upgrade into a 7, that is around a $3,000 price point. Personally, with that jump, I would go into the 7 versus the 6. But this does look like a fairly clean 6, and obviously not all 6s and 7s are equal. And obviously Jerry West is the NBA logo out there, and it's a classic, iconic card. Although, fun fact, he does have an earlier card from Cons. All right, a 1957 Bob Cousy. This one sold on Check Out My Cards, which, if you don't know, I have a full series on this channel talking about building out a ComC store from scratch. Regardless, this 6 also sold for $2,000. There's 1260 of Cousy cards out there in the population report, not specifically 6s. PSA 7 sells for about $4,000, which is a double of the price. These 57s also very tough to find centered well. This one actually looks pretty good, minus top to bottom. Additionally, they tend to have a lot of print defects. This one does not look like it. This is a very strong 6 in my own personal opinion. We're jumping into a Rick Mount 1973 Topps PSA 10. We'll recognize that at least this week, and sometimes with the Vintage Basketball Series, there's a lot of PSA 10s for set builders. There's 4 of these out there, and this sold for $2,020. The PSA 9 is about $23. Dave DeBouchier, I believe that's how you pronounce this one. It sold for $2,200. It has a PSA 2 with an autograph being an 8, and there's only 20 of these cards that are signed. 1975 Moses Malone autograph being a 9. The card is an authentic grade. I wonder if that's like a pen mark right over here. You see that? I wonder if that's why the card specifically didn't get graded. Kind of weird. The autograph almost goes off, which I assume is why it gets the 9, and you can see it's a little bit streaky right there. This one sold for $2,343. It is a pop 23. 1972 Herm Gillum in a PSA 10. This one sold for $2,500. But if you're going to jump to a PSA 9 grade, that's only $43. 1972 Kareem in a PSA 9. This one sold for $2,721. A PSA 8 has sold recently for $171. Tom Henderson, 1977. This one sold for $2,750 in the PSA 10 grade. A PSA 9 sells for about $17. Jumping into the number 14 spot, we have Paul Arzrin, and I believe he was in like the NBA 50 or 75 celebration. I know he's one of the tougher autographs to grab. This specific in an SGC 8 sold for $3,500. Number 13 is a 1977 Don West in a PSA 10. This sold for $3,700. If you want to jump to the 9 grade, that is only going to be about $40. 1979 Alex English in a PSA 10. This one sold for $4,938. A PSA 9 is about $244. 1974 Wilt Chamberlain. This is a very good 4 with a very faint auto. It's hard to tell, but you can see the autograph is right over here. Now, obviously, Wilt doesn't have a ton of autographs out there. That's why this sold for $5,500. It is a pop 4. Just to give you a price breakdown of the specific card, you can find this in a 9 for about $400, but a 10 sells for about $19,200. So this being an autograph, obviously, does not outsell the PSA 10, but it does outsell the PSA 9. Before we jump into our top 10, let's take a look at some honorable mentions. Up first, we have a triple of Gilmore, Washington, and Jones. It's a pop 20 and a PSA 9. There's 3 PSA 10s out there. The last 10 sold for $3,100 in 2024. This in a 9 sold for $750. Next, we have a Wilt Chamberlain Magic Motion. PSA 8 sold for $3,100 at REA in 2024. Sold price on this one was $1,200. These are very tough, and also, to give you guys a heads up, we're going to see more Magic Motion cards. In fact, the next video, or one of the next videos on the channel, is other sports, and there is a soccer, or as they call it in Europe, a football player in there. So make sure to stay tuned for that video. We're dropping it this month for the very first time. A little bit of a sneak peek. Maybe you know who it is. Another Wilt Chamberlain from 1970. I think this was a crazy high comp. Looking up online VCP, most of these sell anywhere from $600 to $800. This one verified sold for $1,400. So maybe this was a nicer 8 than some of the others. I did see some other 8s approach $1,000, but yeah, this was really, really high. 1969 Connie Hawkins with a number 42 inscription, auto being a 10. This sold for $1,400. Cliff Mealy, pop 4 in a PSA 10. This sold for slightly under $1,600. George Carl, another PSA 10 from 1974. Pop 8 in a PSA 10. This sold for slightly under $1,600. Lou Hudson, autograph over here, authentic auto, no grade on the card. This sold for $1,600. I assume it has to be a pretty tough auto to get for that price point. We're going to see 2 1961 Fleer Oscar Robertsons back to back. This is in a PSA 6. It sold for $1,600. This is an autograph, and yeah, no grade specifically on the card. The autograph actually looks pretty nice for an 8. It does look like it's a little bit off the card, so it should have been a 9, I think, but obviously auto grades are all over the place. This sold for $1,700. Personally, I would take the autograph over this one. They're both off-centered, and looks like they have similar eye appeal. I can't tell what's going on in these corners, so I don't know for sure, but I think from like an aesthetic point, this card is a little bit better, but obviously you include the auto. He still does signings. I don't know if he signs the 61 Fleer, though. I believe he doesn't sign the 61 Fleer or any of the cons, which is really a shame, but he's restricted. All right, we're jumping into our top 10, and we're going to start off with the Ernie Calvary, card number 1 in the iconic 1948 Bowman set. Look at that, a PSA 9. This sold for $6,000. Well, there's 4 PSA 9s out there. The total pop on this card is $311. A PSA 6 you can find for $120. An 8 sold for $1,500. All right, 1961 Fleer, Wilt Chamberlain in a PSA 6. There's 277 6s out there. This one sold for $6,100. I believe this is also a brand new cert on this card. George McGinnis, this is a PSA 9, sold for $6,355. PSA 8 you can get for about $158. There's 22 PSA 9s out there, with the total pop-up being $583. Lou Alcindor Kareem, PSA 7 sold for $65.25. A PSA 8 sells for about $23,000, so quite a big jump from the 7 to an 8. And there's 466 PSA 7s out there. 1957 Bill Russell. This is what I was talking about with like the print quality. You saw the other 6 a little bit earlier. It had really great quality. This one looks kind of subpar, although it could be from the photo itself as well. I mean, the photo is pretty exposed. Regardless, this 6 sold for about $9,000. There's 165 6s out there. An 8.5 has sold in the past for $660,000. George Mikan, probably the most famous card in 1948 Bowman set. Well, even one of the most famous vintage basketball cards out there in general. And there's 35 PSA 3s out there, a total pop of $400. This card sold slightly under $10,000. It's nice to see a little bit of a higher grade Mikan. We've seen a lot of 1s and authentics in the last few episodes, so you can start seeing like how expensive this card is once you find it in pretty nice shape. And in my opinion, this is pretty good eye appeal for 3. I've seen a lot worse. 1972 Julius Erving in a 9, super old cert. You can see it starts with a 0, sold about $14,000. If you want to find an 8, that's about $2,000. And there's 161 PSA 9s out there. Number 3 is a 1975 Moses Malone. We saw his auto a little bit earlier. Well, this is a 10 without the auto. Sold for about $15,000. There's 39 10s out there. PSA 9 sells for about $760. We're jumping into number 2 now. Any predictions on the top 2? Let's take a look. 3, 2, 1. Bird Irving Johnson. Always another card that's super popular in these videos, whether it's autographed or just raw by itself if they sell in high grade. This sold for $14,750. Surprisingly, there's over 600 of these in 9s, and a 10 has sold for about $500,000. This is also an old cert. We're going to jump into the most expensive card, and that is Pete Maravich, 1970 in a PSA 9. This sold for $17,100. The funny thing is, if you go check out the Junk Wax video, there's some 87 Fleers over there that sold for about this price in 10s. Personally, I would take the Pete Maravich in a PSA 9 over a Junk Wax Common in a 10, but let me know if you differ. But regardless, there's 87 9s of this out there. And that's it for this video. I'm going to put the Junk Wax on the screen right now because I think you guys should check it out, especially since there's a lot of basketball cards in there. And thanks for watching this video. If you're new, make sure to subscribe. See you in another video.